Welcome to the center of the universe and the home of the 18-time Grey Cup champion Toronto Argonauts. This is the X's and Argos podcast with Ben Grant and JB.
Welcome to the X's and Argos pregame walkthrough brought to you by Something in the Water Brewing. Ben Grant joined as always by JB, and we're here to get you set for the Argos' final home game of the regular season against the Ottawa Redblacks, a game in which they have an opportunity to earn an additional home game where they would host the East semifinal with a win against those Redblacks. We got a lot to talk about today. There's a bunch of transactions. Justin Marshall signing in Hamilton. The Argos bringing in two players for next season, Delonte Hood, Bryce Hampton, both exciting for different reasons. Plus, there's a story on 3 Down Nation about their all-rookie team, and I thought it was kind of cool to see which Toronto rookies were added to that squad. We'll go through the PFF numbers for this week. 6 Toronto Argonauts honored for their play against Winnipeg last week. And we've got a great question from Pick 6 today. Plus, we'll do our game preview, injury report, OCDC, one thing, predictions, put me down for 20, and our CFL picks. All that and more coming up on this episode of the X's and Argos podcast. Saturday. First of all, you got to get down to the game at BMO Field. It's going to be a beautiful day, 20 degrees, sunshine, not a cloud in the sky, perfect weather for football, but you've got to start that day off at Something in the Water Brewing. They open around noon. You got to get down there for a couple of drinks, wander over to BMO Field. It's just steps from the stadium. JB, you're going to try and make it down there with me on Saturday?
Yeah, hopefully I'm feeling a bit better, but that's the plan.
Yeah, excellent. And it's a great place to go pre-game. They've got a ton of great beer to choose from, great food as well. And like I said, you're right there. So make that part of your Saturday plan. Get down to Something in the Water Brewing. Drop by, say hi to us if you get a moment. Enjoy a terrific beer, award-winning beer. Try some Longboat Pale Ale, the beer made for fans of the Double Blue. And then get over to BMO Field to enjoy the Argos Redblacks in the sunshine at BMO Field. JB, before we get into things, let's address your condition. I know you've been shouting all day long, coming fresh off the field, having coached today. Is this illness? Is this screaming your head off? A combination of both?
No, this is mainly illness.
Okay, all right. Well, I appreciate you doing your best to work it through, but I'll take the lead on this, and please add in whatever thoughts you have when you can. And again, everyone appreciates you playing hurt here. Mm-hmm. So let's get started with Justin McManus signing in Hamilton. Justin Marshall signing in Hamilton. Justin Marshall, we didn't get to see much as an Argos receiver. He had that touchdown catch in Montreal and really wasn't seen from much after that. A really interesting receiver prospect, a guy that really had to be used on the outside, and so his position opportunities were limited in Toronto. Are we at the point where it's starting to bother you when Ticats keep signing former Argonauts? Because I feel like half their team is now composed of former Argos. Are you fine with this, or is it getting ridiculous?
No, look, as a former, well, I don't say a former, as I guess a current Patriots fan, I was very used to teams really liking players that we cut. I think it's a compliment. I take it as a compliment. I think it's a sign of respect for the organization. And, as long as none of them really turn into anything too dangerous, I'll be okay with it. But I take it as a compliment for sure.
I am emailing Robert Kraft right now that you are a former Patriots fan.
It's a not very Freudian slip.
Yeah, no, I see it the same way. But you know what this has given me? All these signings of former Argos has given me a little bit of empathy for what the Stampeders went through. I've addressed this before, but I really am starting to understand, because I sort of failed to understand the irritation from Calgary with all of this is the 2020 and 2021 seasons where it seemed like everybody came from Calgary, and there were even the memes with Quick Six being signed by the Argos. And yeah, Calgary fans were not at all amused by it. And I totally get that now. I think this is an interesting perspective. But yeah, you're right. It's when you're a successful team in a salary cap league, this is what's going to happen. You are successful. You win Grey Cups, you win playoff games. You're going to end up, you win the division 3 times in a row. your players are going to be expensive and teams are going to want them. And even guys that don't work out, a guy like Justin Marshall, who didn't really get to show off what he can do. And I think he's a really talented player. He's got some incredible athletic ability. And so it makes sense for the Ticats to bring him in. But that's the thing. When your scouting staff has shown that they continue to hit, people will take chances even on the guys that maybe you have chalked up as misses. So we'll see what becomes of Justin Marshall in Hamilton. Two Argos signings this week. So Delonte Hood and Bryce Hampton, both defensive backs. Let's talk about Hood first. Hood is the one who got by far the most NFL attention between the two. 6'1", 195. He flashed tremendous speed at his pro day. He ran a 4.3, 6.85 3-cone. Those numbers, like those are the two that really draw everybody's attention. He's an incredible athlete playing on the outside. He spent time with the Bengals, the Cardinals, the Broncos, and ended up signing with the Broncos practice roster. Didn't make a regular season game with the Broncos, but the fact that he's on that practice roster tells you the caliber of athlete we're dealing with here in Hood. You love bringing in guys at the, especially like churning over the bottom of the roster, bringing in guys that have flashed in some way. What's your excitement level like for a guy like Hood with that kind of 4.3 speed?
Yeah, I mean, that's professional speed. I mean, there are guys who run that fast who kind of, it doesn't really matter because at the end of the day, it's not a track meet. It's all the question of how fast your game speed is, your ability to react. But certainly, anytime you have an NFL measurable, then I think you get excited.
And he's a guy that seems to fit into what they're looking for in Toronto. They've switched to sort of more, I guess, the fast corners seems to be the way they're going. And that's the new sort of team philosophy, to get as much speed as you can in the defensive secondary. And you see that with guys like Benji Franklin and Mark Milton, guys who can fly, right? And
yeah, I love it. I think man is the way to go for sure, especially, in a league where you have veterans who will just eat you apart with zone.
And it's not that you have to play man all the time, but you have to have that threat, right? Like you have to have the believability that you will go into man. And we didn't see that from, as good as the Argos defense has been the last couple of seasons. They just didn't really play a lot of man coverage at all. That just wasn't their system. And so it's just kind of an interesting dimension, but there've been some. Sorry, go on.
In fairness, it is very difficult to play man in the CFL.
Very. Yeah, there's so much space.
It's a big park.
And the other signing, Bryce Hampton, cornerback, 5'11", 200 pounds. Now, he didn't test nearly as well. Doesn't have the same sort of athleticism, but he brings a couple other elements to the party, which I thought were kind of interesting. So his numbers are kind of like Tavares McFadden, like, so not bad, but, certainly pro-level numbers still, but not necessarily burner numbers. He's not putting down 4.3s or 4.4s. What he is doing, though, is offering you sure tackling and defensive reliability, positional versatility. He's a guy that won the Defensive Player of the Year award for the Indoor Football League, playing with the Vegas Nighthawks, and has played all over the defensive secondary and bouncing around a little bit in college. He got to play pretty much every position. And so different reason to be excited about a guy like Hampton than a guy like Hood. With Hood, it's the athletic potential. With Hampton, it's that versatility. But both guys, I think, are interesting signings to think about next season. And before, like, this feels like when we're talking about like signings for next season, this is what teams are doing right now. And so yes, we know there's still some important games coming up for this season for the Argos, but this is the time of year now where the front office for all teams across the league are signing free agents for next season, looking to continue, because you have to keep restocking the shelves, and it's a continuous rebuild for every team in the CFL. So that's why we're getting excited about these guys for next year. No, they're not going to step on the field this week or anything like that, but it doesn't mean you can't get excited about what's waiting for you next season. And both these guys, I think, have a shot to be of interest next year. 3 Down Nation put out their all rookie team from this season. And I'm going to test you, the listener, listening to this. Can you think, so there's 4 names that 3 Down Nation went with for their all rookie team, taking all rookies across the league. Think about that while I just kind of introduce this segment. The season this year, I thought, was that you didn't have as many runaway candidates as we had in years past, where you're like, oh, well, clearly this guy's going to be rookie of the year. Like, there wasn't really a Qantas Stiggers type player this year, but there were some excellent rookie performances across the league. I would say not as many rookies. Like, in looking through the article, and you can check it out. This, I think, it's JC Abbott's piece that he wrote on 3 Down Nation, but if you take a look at that article, you'll see like there are some positions where it's a stretch. Like, there's just not a lot there. Like quarterback, for example, that's always a tough one. And with special teams, there were some issues as well. So, for example, coming up with a defensive lineman, receivers is a lot easier. Cornerbacks, that's a lot easier. So this piece is worth taking a look at, even though it was a strange year for rookies in the CFL, but there were some very, very good ones. Anderson, the linebacker for Edmonton, comes to mind. Shamar Bridges for the Tiger Cats had a great season. So your 4 Argos that made that list. So you got lineman, Anthony Vandal, who from a virtual last pick of the draft to starting and playing extremely well. He was PFF's, I think, top ranked lineman in pass protection this past week, just to spoil a segment coming up a bit later. Vandal has had some amazing moments and has exceeded his expectation by miles. When you're drafted in the last round of the CFL draft, there's not even an expectation for you to make the team, especially a good team, a playoff team, a Grey Cup contending team. And here he is starting for the majority of the season for the Toronto Argonauts. So that's a no-brainer there. On the D-line, you've got the outside speedster in Derek Parrish, and then the inside massive humanity in Ralph Hawley. Both of those guys making the team. Shout out to Jordan Williams as well, got an honorable mention. But those guys are, again, no-brainers. Hawley wasn't supposed to be a factor this season, but it was injury after injury along the D-line. Jared Brinkman went down, and then Williams went down, backing him up, and then there's Ralph Hawley. And, you and I saw Ralph Hawley in training camp, and immediately remarked at the combination of size and speed that he had, which was pretty unique. So still surprised. I was still surprised with how well he played, but maybe we should have seen this coming and watching how well he performed in training camp. And then the last player is Mackay Polk, the receiver for the Argos, and that seems to make sense. Mackay Polk has been excellent. He has been, for many games, Toronto's best receiver, and it's exciting to think about the things that are waiting for him as a part of the Toronto Argonauts next season and down the road as he and Chad Kelly keep building that rapport and familiarity. It's open up the offense a little bit for the Argos too, having a guy like Mackay Polk, because he's got a bit of a different game than everyone else. He's still the big-bodied receiver that we see in Coxie and Tavares Daniels, but he's got a real sort of after-the-catch playmaking ability. And as his route running starts to improve, if he can become the route runner that Tavares Daniels is, and it's not like he's a bad route runner, he's good at it, but yeah, the possibilities for him are really exciting down the road. So those are the 4 rookies for Toronto.
Amazing, really, when you think about this kind of transition year from that stacked roster of last year to still a very competitive roster. These are all, pillars of the franchise moving forward. It's fantastic to see.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's the pressure that you can see what happens when you don't keep the cupboard stocked. Like, you look at what's happened to Calgary right now. They were great at it for years. Every year they found a couple guys. They found guys from other teams. They discovered guys that hadn't been playing in the CFL. And every year they seem to find these gems. But if you miss for a couple of seasons in a row and you're not finding the guys, and the guys that you are signing aren't working out, and whether it's a quarterback like Mayer, for example, or guys that you bring in that you have high hopes for, and for whatever reason they just don't pan out with your organization, it is really tough to catch up. And so this job is never done in the front office. And that's going back to our opening segment. That's why we get excited about guys like Hood and Hampton that are coming in, because that's the next generation. Every season it's what do we have this year? Because you can't just rest on your laurels. You're gonna end up at the bottom of the standings if you do that. PFF this week honored 6 Toronto Argonauts for their play against the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, 3 on the offensive side of the ball, 3 on the defensive side of the ball. We got to shout out the O-line too. I thought the O-line was outstanding last week. PFF echoing that sentiment with 3 Argos on the O-line that ended up with an above 80% pass grade, which is fantastic. That's a fantastic mark. Here are the three Argos that were honored on offense. So Chad Kelly, quarterback, played a near flawless game. He was outstanding against Winnipeg. It didn't have necessarily the same numbers that we've seen him put up just with that first drive touchdown pass. It's not like the 4 touchdowns that he's thrown in other games, but he was really smart with the football. He didn't put it in harm's way. He took what Winnipeg was giving him, and he was in charge out there, and his grade reflected that. So Chad Kelly as quarterback. The receiver being honored for Toronto, Mackay Polk, who we just finished talking about. Again, factoring in a couple big plays. That one really big play that sort of swung things a little bit was a big momentum changer, that catch on the sideline late in the game to get Toronto out of their own end. That's a beautiful route. Heads up, awareness of space is where he is on the football field, and a great catch. So he's honored too. And then Peter Nicastro at center was the final Argo on the offensive side of the ball. He and the entire line played outstanding last week against the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, and Vendal and Ryan Hunter adding to that as well. They didn't make the PFF team, but they are right there on the cusp. On the defensive side of the ball, I was surprised to see that Flo Romolade didn't make it there because he had a sensational game, but a couple other guys put up great numbers too. So that's where he lost out. But Jake Ceresno was honored on the defensive line from his interior spot. Wyndham McManus from the linebacker position. We knew that was coming. He was what we thought the sort of consensus best player in the field last week. And then Tunde Adeleke from the cover linebacker spot. The reason that is so big is that Adeleke has put together now 2 fantastic games in a row. He was outstanding against Montreal before the bye week. We talked extensively about how well he played in that game. He came back off the bye and showed this wasn't a fluke. What impressed me so much with his game against Montreal was the leadership out there and how he was really directing traffic. In Winnipeg, it was him doing his job, him shutting down and being a part of that defensive unit that was shutting down the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, that wasn't allowing anything to open up in pass coverage, was all over the run when they tried to go to the ground game. And so to see him coming into form, it's an amazing thing because Quincy Moget is down, Robert Priester. This Argos team would be in so much trouble if they couldn't find someone to play that cover linebacker spot. And he's the third guy for all intents and purposes. And he looks like one of the best players on the defense out there. So massive back-to-back games for Tunde Adeleke. We're hoping that continues. And if you want to know what it looks like when you don't have elite play from your cover linebacker, look at what's happened to Ottawa since Darius Pickett went down. It's 5 straight losses now. Since they played the Argos, everything's kind of fallen apart with the loss of Pickett. That cover linebacker spot is such an important position in the CFL. All right, JB, let's get into our pick 6 question for this week. This one's from Scott Ford, and he says, and I'm going to sort of divide this into 2 questions. I thought it was a really good one. He says, what was Ottawa able to do against Toronto in their first meeting that allowed them to beat them so soundly? Are there mismatches the Argos need to worry about? Because on paper, the game should not be close. What do you make of the Argos struggling against teams that sometimes really aren't very good league-wide, and yet defeating teams that are, like Montreal, where they've got 2 wins. Winnipeg, they've got 2 wins. BC, I know BC's slipped off now, but to have 2 wins against the BC Lions means something as well. And yet 3 losses against the Tiger Cats. They haven't beat the Redblacks yet this year. They struggled in Calgary against the Stampeders. What's the deal with struggling against some of the bad teams and playing well against some of the good teams?
Yeah, I mean, I think, there's a couple things that worked. One, of course, is sometimes you just match up poorly with the team. And what they do well, you don't do well. And so suddenly, styles make fights. So, Toronto, I think to some extent, Ottawa's, this was, they hadn't really clicked on their new offense yet. Ottawa's defense was really stifling. So that wasn't a great matchup for a team still trying to find how they wanted to run things. I think that's part of it. Some of it, to be honest, is just luck. Any coach will tell you the 5 plays will tell you why you won or lost a game. And You could point to the three bad things that happened to the Argos in the first quarter, and if those don't happen, the game doesn't get away from them, and they potentially win. But it's just kind of this sliding doors where you had these three pylon events, and they were unable to pull out of the tailspin. I think it's as simple as that. It's like if this guy makes a catch, if this ball isn't tipped, if this play isn't made, suddenly it's a very close ball game, and I think Toronto probably pulls away in the second half. But it's not how it played out, which is often the case in football when you have two teams that are relatively evenly matched. It's just a question of a play or two sending you spiraling off.
Yeah, if you look at some of I rewatched that game this week and leading up to this one, and I had forgotten about some of the really bad luck in that first half that the Argos went through, because they were down 31-3 at halftime. Like, the game was over at halftime. You look at the stats, though, like the Argos stats offensively looked good. It's just they kept turning the ball over. They had the 4 interceptions, only one of which I believe was Chad Kelly's fault. The other 3 were bad breaks, balls that got tipped in the air. 2 went right to Damon Webb off tips, both of which were returned for touchdowns. Like that right away is getting off to a bad start. But everything was working offensively. Remember that Chad Kelly threw for 463 yards and 3 touchdowns in that game. They were running for 9 yards a carry. Kadeem Carey was like the offense was moving, but they just kept turning the ball over. They ended in turnovers. It was a wet day. The ball was slippery. There was these are excuses for sure, but they were still part of the game, and that's not going to happen on Saturday. Certainly, there's going to be far less than the way of excuses on a bright, sunny Saturday afternoon with 20-degree temperatures. So you should get, I guess, maybe more true a game. But the Ottawa Redblacks still played well. It's not like it was just the Argos falling all over themselves. I think the Redblacks did play a solid game. Drew Brown was completing 75% of his passes, something like that. He ended up with like 350 yards passing and a touchdown. Didn't turn the ball over. And that was the key when Ottawa was winning. They didn't really make big mistakes. And if you made mistakes, they would find a way to win. We talked about it early in the season this year. We kept being baffled as to how Ottawa was winning games, but the secret to their success was hanging onto the football, let the other team make a mistake, because eventually they will. And that was really what happened in that game with the Argos. They held their own, though. They were throwing the ball really well, had trouble running it. But it didn't really matter because Toronto just kept giving them points and giving them the football.
And I mean, I know you don't believe in football gods for some reason, but look, sometimes the gods are just not smiling upon you. And, sometimes you can watch a game and you can drop a touchdown in the end zone in the first quarter and just know it's not our day. It's just not our day. You might keep it to yourself and you might not tell anybody else, but, it's much like Kelly's terrible pick at the beginning of that Montreal debacle last year. You're just like, wow, you just can't throw that pick. What is happening here? All right, it'll be fine. But in the back of my mind, you just feel like that's not a pick you come back from. I don't know how to explain it, but sometimes you just see plays and you think, this is not our day. That's a play you can't have and end up winning. And I don't know why that is, but it definitely feels that way.
Yeah, I would attribute that to sports psychology, and I would attribute that to momentum and energy level. And
the God's smiling upon you, or not?
I don't attribute that to the football god smiling upon us, but we have different viewpoints on that for sure. But I see the same thing though. It's not like those things don't happen. I agree with everything you're saying. It's just I think the root cause is a little different there. But yeah, that's basically it. Like, I actually don't think the Redblacks are a team that matches up particularly well against the Argonauts, and so I don't see them as a Hamilton. And yes, they've destroyed Toronto last time. There's no question. It was 31-3 at half. Like that's not a game. And so the Redblacks earned it. The Argos also played horribly, but I do like Toronto as a matchup on paper. It's just that none of the things went right. It was one of those days, like you talked about, where just everything seemed to go wrong. So I don't think there are matchups you need to worry about. Ottawa at times can have a really good pass rush, but Toronto's O-line is excellent. The things Ottawa does well, they do everything okay. I think offensively, They're probably going to have trouble running the ball again, like they did last time. The LeBourne found some gaps, but it wasn't like they were running all over the Argos or anything like that. I think he had like 45 yards rushing or something like that at the end of the day. But it seemed like Brown was able to strike for big plays, and it was in tight coverage. It wasn't busts. It was just being able to sail a ball like an inch over a linebacker's fingertips and drop it in just in front of the DB in tight coverage and behind them. And it seemed like that happened again and again and again. He had a huge play to Miller, another big play to Hardy. Rhymes had a 33-yard catch and run. And it just seemed like every one of those was like inches from being tipped or even picked, and yet it got through every single time. Brown had a great game. Like he was just on point that day, and it just felt like there was nothing the Argos could do. So I don't worry about that being a trend, but you also know that Ottawa is going to bring absolutely everything they have this week. They're on a slide. They're in a position like BC. It's very similar. You look at what's happening at Ottawa, what's happening to the BC Lions. It's being more talked about because it involves the quarterback position. You're talking about Rourke and Vernon Adams. And it looks like Adams is going to start this week for the Lions. And that's a whole different scandal. We kind of called that early, like right when that move was made, we were nervous about the idea of, like, if you've got two quarterbacks, you don't have any. And I didn't think it was going to work this way, but they have to fix that in a hurry. Ottawa, in a similar situation, there's this very injury influence. They've had so many different guys go down at important positions. And the good news for them, as we transition to our injury report, is it looks like Drew Brown is going to be coming back this week. He was taking first-team reps for the Redblacks at practice today in Ottawa. And I think if you're going to look for any sign of hope, if you're the Redblacks, the return of Drew Brown seems to be the answer, because Masoli just hasn't been able to get it done these last few weeks. All right, let's get into that injury report. We'll start with the Redblacks first. Concerns, of course. You've got Bryce Carter limited with the adductor injury. They've also got Justin Hardy. Their receiving core in general is banged up right now, but Justin Hardy limited with the ankle injury. We'll have to wait and see on him. Brilliant Addison practiced full. Bladek was full. So there's some positive things there. Devontae Dedmon with the hand injury was limited, but I think the biggest one of all of those, and Jamal Morrow, less, probably concerned than guys like Justin Hardy, but Jamal Morrow was limited too. But I think the big thing that outweighs all of these other injuries here is seeing Drew Brown go full, because he will give Toronto more trouble than Jeremiah Masoli, I believe, this week. And then on the Argos side, really good injury news. If you could ignore the dozen guys on the 6-game injured list, there's some good stuff here. Some guys that probably won't quite come back here, but when you look down the Argos injury list, their report for today, everybody on that list went full except for Fraser Sopik, who didn't practice. He's not going to go this week, I wouldn't think, with that hand injury. I think it's, that may be a situation where we're looking to the playoffs for Fraser Sopik. Fortunately, they're getting good play from Isaac Darkangelo in the meantime, and they've been starting 4 Canadians on the O-line to really allow for that American-Canadian switch at linebacker. So the guys that went full today, so you got Woody Barron, Brandon Calvert. I don't think we're going to see either of those guys this week. They've got one more game before they come back off the 6-game injured list. You can bring guys back early, but there's not much incentive to. And I think with the D-line being relatively healthy right now, I don't think there's any way they would activate Woody Barron, even if he's ready to go. I think you let it go that full 6 weeks. Brandon Calvert, same thing. They've been playing effectively without a fullback. They've been running the ball extremely well, ironically, since they ran out of fullbacks. Like that's really where this running game has turned around, where they've really focused on getting 20 to 30 carries a game after they ran out of fullbacks. It's so weird. And then Kadeem Carey was limited. Remember, he left the game with back spasms last week. He was able to practice full today. That's huge. And then I think really big news, Jonathan Edouard practiced full today. He is eligible to come off the 6-game injured list, as is Daniel Kwamu. I don't know if we'll see him, but I wonder if we'll see Jonathan Edouard make a return. He, of course, had that really nasty elbow injury back in Hamilton weeks ago, midsummer, early summer. And he's eligible to come off that 6 game. So we'll see if he and Kwamu do. And then Adam Guillemette, who missed last week with the back injury, practiced full yesterday and today. I expect he will make his return to the lineup as well. And yeah, that's the injury report. So lots of good news when you see full along the injury report. That bodes well. And I think with those other guys that are sort of still waiting on maybe the last week of the season, the hope for the Argos is that last week doesn't matter, and now you can cycle guys in that you're trying to get a little bit of action after being on the injured list for a while. There's a bunch of guys that could be activated for that game to try and get them up to game speed heading into the playoffs. All right, JB, let's break this one down. The game preview. Before we even get to the game preview, part of this game preview is emphasizing the importance of you bringing non-perishables to the game. This is Purolator's Tackle Hunger game. This was the one of the most important things in the world to Chris Schultz. He did such a good job promoting this, and it meant so much to him. And because of that, and because of him, it in turn now means so much to me, because I don't want to let him down. And so I really implore you to, if possible, if you're able to, bring some non-perishable food items to BMO Field on Saturday for the Purolator Tackle Hunger game. It's such an important cause. You've got over 20 million pounds of food has been donated by CFL fans over the last 20 years, but the need is greater than it's ever been. One of the stats that when I was preparing for this segment earlier today, I was looking at some of the statistics behind what's needed for this food drive. What caught my eye is the fact that 1 in 3 food bank clients are children, and that I found really moving. And to know that you had in March over 1.5 million people visit food banks, it just tells you how great in need this is. And so if you have the means and you're able to bring non-perishable foods to BMO Field this week for Purolator Tackle Hunger, please do. Please don't forget, and you'll be able to drop them off at the entrance as you come in. It meant so much to Chris Schultz, and it really should mean that much to all of us as well. And so to honor Chris Schultz, I want to make sure I get that message out there. Bring your non-perishables to BMO Field on Saturday.
Yeah, there's no reason everybody can't bring a bag. You can go to the store and buy stuff. You can take what's in your cupboard. But it is an incredible feeling when you do it, knowing that somebody's going to have food on their table that they wouldn't have had without you. Very easy to do. It's very affordable to do. You're being given a perfect opportunity here. You just carry it to the stadium and they take it from you. You don't have to carry it around all day or anything. I think, yeah, I would say it's incumbent upon everybody going to the game to bring a bag of items.
And for those of you that don't know JB very well, which is probably all of you, JB walks the walk as well. I've known him for a long time, and I've been with JB early in the mornings before events like this, where he's gone specifically to grocery stores to buy bags and bags of food for this exact purpose. And so, I'm telling you that, he will go out there and do that. And so hopefully we can all do something similar as well, and really put up some outstanding numbers for the Purolator Tackle Hunger Drive at this week's game against the Redblacks. All right, let's get into the game itself. It's huge because this is essentially, for the Argos anyway, it's for a home playoff game. If the Ottawa Redblacks win this game, it's not that the Argos can't still clinch a home playoff game, but it gets more difficult. So here's how the last 2 weeks go. We know we've got Toronto hosting Ottawa this week. In the final week of the season, Toronto is at Edmonton and Ottawa is hosting Hamilton. So if Ottawa wins this week in Toronto, then it would mean Toronto would need to beat Edmonton and Ottawa would have to lose at home to Hamilton in order for Toronto to gain back that home field advantage. And that's just not nearly as good a situation. What you're trying to do as Toronto is wrap it up this week, because if Toronto beats Ottawa, the last game of the regular season doesn't matter to the Argos or the Redblacks for that matter. And that's huge for Toronto because they go into that week knowing they're hosting the home playoff game, which is a massive advantage, but also you can now rest guys. Now Ottawa can too. Both teams can kind of treat that as a bye, and both teams could definitely use that time. But it is a huge advantage to be able to prepare, spend a couple weeks preparing. It's almost like you have a first round bye heading into the playoffs. It's very similar to that. So it's a lot on the line for the Argos this week, because otherwise it means there's no bye next week, and now you've got to go all out against Edmonton and then hope that Hamilton can do you a favor, and Argos do not want to be in a position where you are looking for a favor from the Hamilton Tiger Cats, because that's just not going to come. So, they need to take care of business this week at BMO Field. And what I love about it, the weather. 20 degrees, sunshine, not a cloud in the sky. That's the weather forecast for this Saturday. The environment is not going to be a factor. And so you are going to see Chad Kelly be able to sling it. The grass is going to be in great shape. They're going to be able to run the ball. Receivers aren't going to be slipping and falling. Nothing like what we saw at TD Place several weeks ago when these two teams faced last. So yeah, it is going to be a great one, and the stakes couldn't be higher. It's really... there's a battle going on in the West as well. These, those two battles, those are the last two battles that we're thinking about now. Winnipeg and Saskatchewan for the West Division title, and then Toronto and Ottawa to see who will host the East semifinal. All right, it's time for OCDC. I'll get OCDC off and rolling here. We'll start with the Ottawa Redblacks. My plan on offense for the Redblacks, Drew Brown looking like he will return. For me, it is bombs away. I think you have to fire that ball downfield. You're looking for big plays. It worked last time, like I said, getting Rhymes involved in the passing game. And of course, they had that big play from Miller as well. Justin Hardy, we'll see if he's able to play, but he had a big game too, with 6 catches, all sort of in clutch situations. And he had that one big one that went for 26 yards. And I think that's how you have to beat the Argos if you're the Redblacks. You're not going to do it by chipping away downfield. I don't see the Redblacks be able to keep up that consistency and avoid getting flags all the way down the field that way. I think it's going to have to be big strike. I do think Drew Brown is going to have to use his legs. We'll see what his level of health is like coming into this game too. I know it's not an ideal scenario. You've got your quarterback coming back from an ankle injury. You don't want him necessarily out there running all over the field. But if this game means as much as I think it does to the Ottawa Redblacks, I think you gotta go for it. And Brown's going to have to make his own space. He's going to have to get outside the pocket, and he's going to have to run for some first downs too. It will be on him to move the chains when there's nothing open downfield. But yeah, try and attack deep middle of the field, over the linebackers in front of the DBs, and work those rails. Get up that sideline. Take 50-50 balls when you find the Argos in man coverage. I think that is the recipe for the Redblacks beating the Argos this week. What is Ottawa's defensive plan, JB, against the Argos?
Well, Ottawa is very good defensively. They still are. They do stop the run really well. I think that their only hope is a rock fight. They cannot get into a shootout with Toronto. I think a shootout favors Toronto considerably. So if I'm Ottawa, I think for sure you concentrate on what you're good at. I think you take away the run, you take away that double-sided aspect of Toronto's offense. You're going to force Chad Kelly to be the star of the show, and that, as we saw in Ottawa, that can be a variety of things when it happens, and sometimes it's a win, and sometimes it's a bunch of turnovers. So I think that's what they're going to look at. I think they're going to come in very confident that that they have Chad Kelly's number. It'll be a question of has Kelly, and I think he has gotten more comfortable and a little less sort of trying to light the entire world on fire or kind of win 9 games in one game. I think Kelly has kind of settled in more into an offense, and that'll make it harder. But if you're Ottawa, for sure, you stop the run, you play that deep cover, you try and bait Kelly into making deep throws, and you try and get him, off schedule with pass rush, and try and get those turnovers. You're going to live and die by turnovers. I think, much like the running back yardage was going to be indicative last week. I think the turnover battle is the whole show this week.
Looking at the offensive side of the ball for the Toronto Argonauts, when we switch the field here, I think the Toronto Argonauts plan is going to have 2 elements to it. I think you want to start off by really slowing down the Ottawa pass rush and frustrating them a little bit too. I think I'm looking at quick passes. I'm looking at RPOs. I really do want to use that ground game that I know they didn't get to use much against Ottawa last time because the lead built up so quickly against them, that 31-3 deficit that we talked about at halftime. But You keep the running game going, short passes. Don't let the pass rushers even get close to Chad Kelly. You got to keep him clean, get those quick passes out there, and see if you can string a few drives together. Now, as we start getting to the mid-second quarter, end of the second quarter, into the second half, now I think there's some opportunities to open it up a little bit. I think you're going to find members of the secondary starting to press. This is a pretty different looking defensive secondary than we saw before, where you've got like Money Hunter playing center field, and obviously Darius Pickett isn't playing that Sam linebacker spot. We'll see how they sort it out this week. I imagine Williams and Fry are going to be lined up there again on the depth chart this week against the Argos. And I think you can exploit that in the second half. I think you're going to find that those guys are jumping and trying to come in. We've seen Money Hunter's he's a great DB. And I'm not saying that, this is a smart guy to pick on because he'll make you pay for that. But he is sort of playing out of position, and I know he's had a few weeks at it now, but I think that there is something that you can exploit, the aggressiveness there, his sort of ball hawk nature. I think you can take advantage of that if you can get those guys crashing and coming downhill a little bit. There may be some room over top, and so I would love to see some of those concepts. Some of my favorites that I've talked about, I love Dagger, and I think if you can see him coming in on a deep dig route, and maybe he lets that seam go by him, to Mackay Polk or on the other side, maybe to Daniels. I think those concepts in the second half have some real promise, and then you look to close it down with the heavy running game where you're now bringing in Adeboboye, mixing it up a little bit with the shiftiness of McMahon, and you don't need to rely on carry as heavily in the second half. So that's my recipe: carry and short passes in the first half, and that opens up to deep downfield passes on high-low concepts, especially over the middle of the field where you can involve the Sam linebacker, the safety, and see if you can strike on some big plays, and then close it down with that pounding running game at the very end. JB, what is your Toronto Argonauts defensive plan against the Rouge et Noir d'Ottawa?
Well, Ottawa is on the flip side is not tremendously efficient offensively. I like just playing straight up ball. The Toronto is incredibly good at stopping the run. Yes, I'd love to play Mazzoli. I'd prefer to play Mazzoli. Ottawa is able to move the ball, but I think this is going to be a combination game because I think if Toronto can get out and get the points, it's going to be really hard for Ottawa to keep up with that. And I think that defensively, you just have to wait for that opportunity for the pick. I play a lot of man coverage underneath. I want to make sure I'm taking away easy yards. I want to make sure I'm not giving any free yards. Making sure when we're rushing, we're not rushing past a quarterback or not giving up. Not giving up contain there, and then essentially daring the quarterback to beat us. I think that Ottawa will move the ball. Ottawa will be successful, but you can play bend don't break with this offense because this is not an offense that's going to put 40 on you. So you don't have to be exotic to win this game. I think you just have to keep them in front of you. You want to avoid quick hit touchdowns, make them work for their touchdown, make them eat the clock, and Ottawa will just run out of time and won't be able to keep up the score.
One thing for this week for me is no turnovers. My one thing I think is like that's the win right there. If it's not as easy as it sounds. Ottawa does a good job of creating turnovers. We saw that the last time these two teams played. You just can't turn the ball over because that is the way that this team beats you, and that's always like going back to our pick six question from Scott Ford. It's how like this game on paper, this should be an Argos win on paper. It really should be. But what can even a game like this out very quickly is turning the football over. If Toronto takes care of the football, almost no matter what else happens in this game, I think they'll win. Protect the football, win the game. So for me, that is my one stat. Take care of the football. Secure it as a runner. Chad Kelly's got to be smart with not putting that ball into harm's way. Sometimes that means eating it or scrambling for a couple of yards, sliding. That's fine. Throw the ball away, throw it out of bounds. Sometimes throw it at someone's feet. Those are all okay. If you avoid turning the ball over against the Redblacks, you win the game. What is your one thing for this week, JB?
Um, I think my one thing is red zone defense. I'd love to see the Argos keep Ottawa to no touchdowns, field goals only. I think again, if in a race, it's the race to 30, and you're just not going to get there kicking three. And I think they have the defense to do it. I think that they can take care of that. Of course, the turnovers will be all, but just for a change of pace, I'm going to go with a no touchdown game.
Wow. Okay, that is a lot to ask, but so is no turnovers, I suppose. But yeah, expectations are high coming into this one. How's this one end, JB? What's your final score? Who wins?
I like Toronto. I like Toronto at home. I think that the Winnipeg look, you could easily look at this as a down from that Winnipeg high, but I don't think so. I think this is a team that's found its gear. With Kelly, with the defense, they're coming back healthy. It's a nice afternoon game. It's going to be a gorgeous day. The all the ghosts and gods will be smiling upon us with bags and bags of food. I see Toronto 35 and Ottawa 21.
This is not the first time this year where we've had almost the exact same score prediction. I see it going similarly. I think Toronto's a better team, and I do believe in trap games and letdown games. I know, like, my broadcast partner Mike Hogan and I have argued about this before, because he's not a believer in that. He's around the guys and he sees the work that they put in every week and how seriously they take every opponent. And so I totally get that way of looking at it, but I just can't help but see the existence of traps, and I am a believer in trap games. This might be one of them if the stakes weren't so high, and that's the reason it won't be. This game just matters too much, and so yeah, they're coming off a huge win in Winnipeg. If this were the middle of the season, then yeah, I don't know if I would feel nearly as confident. In fact, I know I wouldn't feel nearly as confident, because to me, that would be a trap game, going into a mid-season game off a huge high, beating Winnipeg in Winnipeg, which they hadn't done since 2015, coming back, playing against a struggling divisional opponent. But yeah, not this case, not this week. The stakes are too high. This matters too much. Getting a home playoff game, it's not just important, philosophically, into the team. Ryan Dinwiddie stresses home wins so much. It's really important to him. And I can imagine how much he's talked this week about how crucial it is they lock up home field advantage for that first round of the playoffs. So,
yeah, they don't want to go to Ottawa in
no,
their black and white field.
Their black and white field. I'm not a big fan of that field. The conditions are hit and miss. You can get a wind. And I'm sure the Argos have some memories of being there earlier this year.
It's a playoff game, and I'm sure the mission is to go to Montreal and get revenge for the season that was. And this is the first step on that mission.
Yeah, this is them. That it will show that to put this streak together, coming off that huge win against Montreal at home, going to Winnipeg, winning again. You can tie another win to it like this. We've seen this happen so many times before with those Argo Grey Cup teams that maybe the whole season doesn't work out exactly the way they wanted it to. They're flirting with 500 for a large part of the season. That's basically what the season was. But they got hot at the right time. They went on a tear. It was a 10-8 team or something like that, a 9-9 team that ends up just kind of getting hot at the right time. This team's better than that, but they seem to be getting hot. And a win over Ottawa this week puts fear into the minds of a lot of other CFL teams around the league, because you do not want to play. You look at the roster. Like, if these guys are all playing well, this is not a team that you want to go up against. So
I would be, I mean, I don't say the last time I felt this confident, but I would be genuinely shocked if they didn't come up with a result this week.
My prediction for the record is Toronto 34, Ottawa 20. So I'm just 1 point off. You had them both scoring one more point in this one. It's time for Put Me Down for 20, JB. And I don't know how your level of confidence is coming into this segment from the last segment, but it's been a bit of a rough ride. I was 2-0 last week with Argos plus 3.5, Edmonton on the money line. You were 0-2 last week, looking for 2 touchdown passes from Chad Kelly, and Montreal setting your own line at minus 14. Probably should have won. They really outplayed the Redblacks, but at the end of the day, only won by 7. Our Golden Fleece standings, I'm at 240 and you are at 94 and a half Golden Fleeces. The good news is you can't possibly run out of them before season's end.
I made it.
You made it through. So where are you going this week?
Well, there's not a lot this early in the week in the world of mythological fleeces from the good people of Athens. So my two are both pretty basic. I've got almost Grantian in their obviousness. I'm going to take the Argos to win by less than 14 at 110, and the same for Hamilton.
Yeah, I didn't find much of interest either on the sports books out there, and so I've got very similar bets. One's actually the exact same. But later in the week, if you were looking for something later in the week that popped up, I would take a close look at Chad Kelly with 2 or more touchdown passes in this one. But
That's a dangerous.
It is a dangerous
times
one.
I've fallen prey. Beware, dragons be there.
I think this is the week though, but it's just not. It hasn't shown up there, so we don't have lines yet on that. So we'll have to go with what we have. I'm also taking the Ticats to win between 113 points at plus 110, and then I'm going with the blowout win score. Toronto winning by 14 plus. I don't know if I don't know if we're going to get that high, but I love the odds there at plus 270. I just felt like, well, may as well roll the dice on that one. So 10 Golden Fleeces on each of those. Those are my picks for this week. And then finally, our CFL picks. You were 2-2 last week. I was 4-0 last week, so I am now at 46, 26, and 2. And you are at 37, 35, and 2. And so you may need to take some chances. I'll give you my picks before you put yours down this week, JB. First game is Calgary at Hamilton. I'm taking the Tiger Cats. I don't feel great about this, but I'm certainly not putting any faith in Calgary. Hamilton's coming off a bye week. So, yeah, let's see what the Tiger Cats can do at home against the Stampeders. Where are you going in this one?
I like the Tiger Cats. I mean, neither team really has much to play for here. I think Calgary probably locks up the number 1 pick here. I like Hamilton.
And then the next game is Ottawa at Toronto. I'm taking the Argonauts. Are you sticking with the Boatmen for this?
I am, yeah. I like them there.
And then Montreal at BC. This is the toughest one. I don't know what to do with this game. I'm still not sure how invested Montreal is going to be in this. They don't really have any reason to be, other than this could be, maybe the coaching staff views this as, look, we're going to the site of the Grey Cup. We're playing in BC Place. We are hoping to be back here next time. Let's come back to a place where we put down a good performance and played well. Like, that could be the strategy. Or they could just say, hey, this is a road game across the country. We're not going to start anyone of any relevance in this game, and we're just looking to get through it healthy and get back home for our last week of the season against Winnipeg. So I don't know which way it's going to go. BC's also mixing stuff up. They're playing as poorly as any team in the league right now, but they've made the change at quarterback. Vernon Adams is going to start this week. It's a coin flip. I'm taking the BC Lions. I feel like that's just slightly more... I'm just slightly more confident in that than I am in taking Montreal, making that trip. Where are you going?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I'd love to take Montreal. I think BC with the quarterback change, will calm down a little bit. The work stuff has turned into a bit of a, I think just a little too excited, a little too much. If you're Montreal and you consider yourself a Grey Cup favorite, which you should, why would you show BC anything? I think you're at the point of keeping as much close to the vest as possible. I don't see any reason Montreal tries to win this game. If they could knock BC out of the playoffs, 100% you would put the dagger in them. But
right.
BC's in. I'm sure Montreal is just going to go and play incredibly vanilla and not worry about what's going on with BC. But I'd love to see Montreal's mindset. Maybe they see BC as flailing and they want to really kind of bury them a little bit. Yeah, it's really curious. But my gut instinct, says BC probably wins pretty handily.
Saturday afternoon, BMO Field. It starts off with a trip to Something in the Water Brewing, and it ends with you going to BMO Field for a fantastic football game on a beautiful sunny afternoon. It's a 3 o'clock start. Don't forget, that is a time change. It was originally scheduled to be a 4 o'clock kickoff, so if you put that in your calendar, make sure you make that adjustment. It was changed to 3 o'clock to accommodate the CTV TV schedule. And of course, you can hear Mike Hogan and I on TSN 1050 if you want to catch the radio broadcast, either while you watch on TV or while you watch live at the stadium, or if you're stuck driving around or at work that day, make sure you catch us on the radio broadcast. That is a 3 p.m. kickoff. The Redblacks at the Argos to settle home field for the East Division semifinal. That will just about do it for us on this pregame walkthrough of the X's and Argos podcast. For the ailing JB, this is Ben Grant saying so long, and may all your pre-snap reads be good ones. I'll see you.
Go, Toronto Argos, go, go, go. Pull together, fight the